It's been more than a month since Sony announced that they would be scaling back production for Blu-ray or physical media for the PlayStation at January 2028. And it's still going, as in a lot of the pushback, the discussion, and now things are really picking up here and really turning up the heat right now for Sony when it comes to the legal side, lawsuits, regulators. They're definitely taking more and more of a look at really the hold that Sony has on this current marketplace. And now we're starting to see like large accounts and movements here, even backing some of these initiatives. And I want to take a look at that as well as discuss somewhat of where we are right now with digital ownership, which feels basically non-existent with some of these companies even now trying to look forward already to cloud gaming. But we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. So this really picked up online the other day. This is Stop Killing Games. Of course, they've been big advocates around, well, people like these companies stop killing games, and a lot of it started with The Crew, but it's really just looked around at the entire industry in general, where games can literally just be taken offline, removed from your library, even if you paid full price for it. And in some cases, as we saw recently with a cloud streamed game on the Switch, doesn't matter if it was a few years ago, it's all built into their end user license agreement, and you don't actually own the game. They're willing to be upfront with you about it then, but not necessarily when you buy the game and it says, buy game. Okay, so they say it's time to sue Sony, join us. Does It Play and Stop Killing Games are backing the class action lawsuit against Sony. So this is actually a lawsuit that is going on right now with the Netherlands, and it's the Mass Damage and Consumer Foundation started the Fair PlayStation Collective Action on behalf of Dutch PlayStation gamers. The procedure revolves around the question of whether Sony abuses its dominant position by allowing digital purchases exclusively within its own closed ecosystem and therefore charging too high prices, or prices are just too high. Now, we know that Sony, the way they work is there's a 30% cut that they take from all the games that flow through their digital storefront. Now, I do believe there are some instances that are quite rare compared to how many games are on there, but the split will be altered somewhat. Like, I'd be shocked if Sony was getting 30% of GTA 6. Something tells me that Take-Two is probably getting a more favorable split just because of the amount of money that they're going to immediately flow through that PlayStation store, but also the partnership and the marketing that they have going. It wouldn't shock me if they just happen to get a better deal than 30%. Nonetheless, the point is that Sony does control the market completely there. And years ago, Sony removed the ability to buy games like outright digitally from these big box stores. And what I mean by that is you used to have code cards up on the wall. They scaled that back to where you could really just buy like in-store points, basically gift cards for the PlayStation Store, and that way you just exchange money for money, really, and then use it through their PlayStation Store. Not necessarily setting up a retailer to compete with them on the game side for a game to game basis. It's just money for money and then whatever Sony's selling it for, right? The idea is eliminating competition around the price tag for any one game. And many different lawsuits started to pop up after that specifically happened, and Sony's been kind of working through them. Unfortunately, the way that they've been working through them is more or less just settlements. Like there is one that went to settlement, and it's about to finish up, I believe, in October, and it's for like $8 million. And like Sony, of course, is going to pay $8 million to just keep it moving. Like clearly, that's a drop in the bucket to them for the amount of money they stand to make in just an all digital ecosystem here. So the way that this is working, and again, they're just right now representing Dutch gamers, PlayStation gamers, as they say here, but this apparently would work all the way back to 2013 and really just kind of targeting the start of the PlayStation 4 generation, where every PS4 launched with the ability to buy digital games from the storefront a la carte, and from there Sony being able to control it with their 30% cut. Now, they went back, and this is an entire page that they updated after Sony had made that announcement, and they've been kind of adding on to it and updating it as they've gone along, but just really pointing out that Sony is moving away from physical media, ceasing production of physical discs for new PlayStation games. So all that's really done in their mind and many other cases is just kind of strengthen their argument that Sony is working to funnel all these game purchases specifically through them. Now there is one caveat to that. We don't necessarily know the entirety of the story because Sony over on their, here we go, PlayStation blog said that they'll continue to prioritize resources to drive innovation in how players can access games and provide choices as to whether players prefer to purchase new games, whether that's at retailers or PlayStation stores. So, to right now, to my understanding, because they had mentioned this with investors, seems to be a code in a box situation. We don't necessarily know 100%, but that's kind of what they were alluding to. And it would make sense that that's the direction that Sony would want to go. And while they used to do that through code cards, it technically would be something I can point at and say, no, we're allowing this retailer to sell the game. Yes, it's a code in a box, and that technically means it will never be used. So there is no used market for us to compete with. But we're not just having them sell gift cards for us. This is, in our world where it's all a digital ecosystem, this is a tangible product, tangible game that can then be digitized. I know it's a really roundabout and kind of annoying argument, but that's what happens when you get into court. They'll make these kind of arguments, sure. But this one is over in the UK as of March 10th, 2026. And similar situation here. Millions of UK PlayStation users have been victims of excessive and unfair download charges. A tribunal has heard $2.7 billion, though, in this case for the class action lawsuit brought against Sony by consumer campaigner Alex Neil, claims the console maker prevented players from purchasing digital products outside of its own closed ecosystem. This is also going to be an entire thing they'll be focused in on, this closed or this walled garden. And this is where Sony does need to be careful, all right? Because while I'm sure they love to be able to get out of a lot of these different lawsuits and just keep rolling towards this digital ecosystem where they control everything and it's completely closed down, we've seen it happen with Apple being one of the latest examples where, they went to court over it, and then we got to the point where Epic Games can kind of go around Apple's payment processing for Fortnite transactions, and it's, you look at that and go, oh, that would really do some damage to Sony and their bottom line because of just how reliant they are right now on live service games, of course, microtransactions, battle passes. That revenue, as we looked at in their recent earnings report, that alone, you combine physical and digital games, things people are arguing over right now. Yeah, all the add-on content eclipses that all combined by like a fair amount. So that would be devastating to Sony if there was a way to go around this closed ecosystem, even for add-on content, and they could just bypass that, and then Sony doesn't get 30% or so of all these different transactions. We also had this pop up just about, right around when Sony made that announcement, Mexican lawmakers to file antitrust complaint against PlayStation and Sony over PlayStation Store following the potential end of physical games. And here, the thing is, we keep seeing these pop up, right? Like, there is obvious pressure that's mounting against Sony from regulators and lawmakers, and this is definitely something they're focusing in on. And sure, sometimes we get the class action lawsuits that in this case is worth a fair amount of money, $2.7 billion. I would say the money itself, if you've been part of a class action lawsuit, whether on purpose or just by accident, because they just usually opt you in and you have to just opt out yourself, and most people either don't think about it, don't know about it, don't care enough, right, to opt out even, and they're like, oh, maybe I'll get something out of it, and then you do, and it shows up in the mail 4 years later or something, and it's for $12 on a check. You're like, great. Is it worth going out to the bank to even deposit this for how much gas costs or whatever? But the point is, the money angle, I don't think is going to be as much of a driving force for just regular people out there who are playing games on their PlayStation. Now, trust me, for any law firms who are able to successfully navigate the courtroom for years even, and then get to the finish line and get paid out millions, it'll be worth it to them. No, to me, it'll be more so the pressure, the idea that not only more lawsuits could come down, but that more government interference could come down. And that's the thing we have to understand. I know there is a big war that's been brewing and continuing right now on the internet around physical media and people pushing back on Sony to keep game discs around. The thing is, we have seen at least some statements from officials that they can't technically keep Sony like in the game for physical media. Like they can't tell them, "Hey, you have to make Blu-ray discs for your PlayStation." And no, that's true. Because if that's the case, you could have the government interfere for all kinds of things and make these console makers, these platform holders, do all kinds of stuff that they want. And so that is a slippery slope as it is. But it to me comes back then to the idea of digital ownership, which right now heavily favors the platform holders and is a massive disadvantage for any gamers out there, customers, whoever. You have the short end of the stick for this entire situation. Whether you buy a game and it's immediately locked to your account, or it gets to a position where they just don't want to provide the game, or they have to take it back for licensing or likeness, or maybe they just don't want it out there anymore. Like even, and it could be down to even as something as basic as a demo. I know PT is brought up a lot, but that is a good example. It's like that is such an interesting demo that is lost to time. And if you want to play it, you do have to basically just hack your PlayStation 4 and load it up yourself. See, because at least with physical media being around, we had an out. And we still do right now, but not beyond January 2028, to where there is an option with how slow this whole digital ownership is to get figured out. We have a way to buy a game and it not be attached to a singular account. So, for example, I have a PlayStation 5 that I set up for the kids. And I'm like, hey, you can play Ratchet and Clank if you want. I have the game disc, pop it in the PS5, install, and you can play it. But I thought about it. I said, man, if that wasn't the case and there was only digital, I don't want to put my PlayStation Network account on their PS5 and then also have it on mine. I want to leave that just on my system. So how would I let them play or borrow Ratchet and Clank if it's solely attached to my account? What you should be able to do is if you buy a game digitally, it should be a local setup, local files that is completely detached from your account, but still on your system. And if I want to take a 128 gigabyte flash drive, plug it into the PS5, and move the local files with a license that's attached to it, yes, there will be a unique ID attached to it, but move it to the USB stick, and then take it upstairs, drop it on their PS5, they should be able to play it. It should just be its own singular thing. See, because in that case, if your account gets banned for whatever reason, or it gets stolen, you don't have to then go, oh, I will be buying all my games, I guess, all over again. Because if you had them physically, you wouldn't be. You would say, man, that's really annoying. I can't get this account back. I don't know. Is PlayStation with their security stuff, I guess. Or yeah, maybe you are going a little crazy online and you got banned, but you still have all your stuff. You can reinstall it. These are the things that Sony should have spent the last console generation, the one we're in right now, the PS5, figuring out. Instead, cutting out physical media and just saying, oh, well, we'll see what happens is a choice. So if nothing else, I think they still had another generation where they should have kept physical media around as kind of a fallback, as like, hey, no, there's still a way to not have games attached to accounts, and we're going to work through this, figure it out over the next 5 or 6 years or so, to where we get to a position where we are ready to detach from physical media, because obviously they want to, third parties want to, and honestly, a lot of the mainstream doesn't seem to care. They seem indifferent, so they're able to weigh it in favor of digital. But you got to have the digital ownership and rights figured out before you make that jump, and they haven't. And honestly, I think you should be able to sell your digital games. You should be able to trade them in. Like, these are all things that should have been ironed out, and now we are about to head into the PlayStation 6 generation and the Xbox Helix generation, because Xbox is more digital at this point than Sony is. With none of that resolved, and I'm not really sure how this works out with Sony as more and more uproar happens and more regulators take notice, because they can move the needle with Sony, and Sony could find themselves in a situation where they have to be very, very reactive, and that could end up completely backfiring on them. Now, I will say there's still so many things we don't know about the next generation. It is possible that they do have some of the stuff worked out and they're just not ready to say anything because the PlayStation 6 isn't ready to be presented yet. So, hopefully it's ready to be presented next year and it's not getting delayed due to the memory or RAM crunch that's happening right now. Because if so, then man, they're going to be sitting there for a very awkward year, being like, we should be able to tell people about what our digital plans are, but we can't because the PS6 is now coming out in 2028. Just a lot of this feels very, very rushed right now. And it kind of feels like something that was decided not that long ago. You know what the thing that's really sticking out to me that makes me think that's the case? You know how we were seeing so much advertising with the PlayStation 5 and the console? And think about GTA 6. Remember they showed us GTA 6, what was it, like the second trailer or whatever it was, and it was pretty clear Sony had the marketing because they changed their app to look like the GTA 6 color scheme and everything. And then they had an advertisement with the PlayStation 5 right next to GTA 6, and it was the disc-based unit. And then they pulled the ad down, put it back up hours later, and it was the digital PS5 unit. Almost like they had old marketing that they were going to uh, originally have put up, and they decided to change it for some reason. This is what I mean. Some of these things are sticking out to me, and I'm noticing old marketing with the disk drive, new marketing that's months newer, maybe up to a year, and all of a sudden it's missing. So it feels somewhat recent of a decision, somewhat reactive. Makes me think Sony believes they do need these margins badly for digital, and man, it's gonna be interesting. But yeah, so the push continues online right now against Sony when it comes to physical media, and more of these lawsuits popping up with class action. And once we start hearing from regulators and it getting serious in places like the EU, that's when you could see change be enacted. Maybe Sony has something up their sleeve to surprise us with into 2027 with the PS6 presentation, but at this point, I'll believe it when I see it. But let me know what you guys think about all of this down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.